Have you always been that way where you see something that you think is the next, because you talk about it, you just go buy like I bought a book and I just figured it out and did it. Have you just always been like that? You see something that you think's the next big thing and you just go dive in and learn all you can about it?
Every dime is critical, and they're thinking about all these expenses. And I think sometimes the employees on site, they lose sight of that's someone's real money that they've invested, or the lender. We have all these expenses that we have to pay out, and everything adds up. So we have to be thinking about how can we, I always say it comes down to drive revenue and reduce costs. Those are the two core things that we can do. And that's what we should always be thinking. How can we drive revenue on this property? How can we reduce costs? And now people say, oh, you can just have the AI do it. No, you can't. No, you can't. You can have the AI create an outline, and you can have the AI put some flop out. But what gives the book meaning are your stories and all the pain and all the things that you've done. That's what you would probably be an incredible writer of a book, because you would sit down and think about, here's my outline, and here's the stories. Here I'm going to tie it together. And stories are what we remember.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Saucetown Investor Podcast. I am your host, Matt Cox, back with another amazing guest today. Really excited for this one. Guest started as an on-site manager of a 24-unit apartment building. He answered phones, fixed toilets, and collected the rent. Eventually, he ran operations as the chief operating officer, overseeing 23,000 units across 11 states. That company didn't survive the 2008 crash, but our guest did. He went on to co-found Quantitative Realty Capital, QRC, to do it smarter. They buy underperforming apartments, fix what's broken, and create real returns, not just pro formas. I know our GP, LP, all of our investor listeners can relate to that one. Over the last 30 years, he's been involved in 30,000 plus units, led $233 million in renovations, and fixed hundreds of distressed properties. Those are some serious numbers. Our guest today, I am joined by Ken Doble. Ken, how are you doing?
Excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you here. We were talking off air. Ken and I have gotten to know each other a little bit through LinkedIn, which is a wonderful place actually to meet a lot of cool people. And then chatted a few weeks ago, and I immediately was like, we have to get him on the pod. Just you're a wealth of knowledge, and we're excited to have you here today, Ken.
Good. I'm glad to be here.
And from the start, I went back and forth. I didn't include it in your bio because I wasn't entirely sure how to describe you, because you've done a lot of different things in this business. Would you consider yourself an investor, an operator, a manager, a jack of all trades? Like what do you call yourself?
I definitely am a real estate investor, but that comes with the hats that you have to wear. You have the finding the deals, you have the operating the deals, closing the deals, raising the capital, all aspects of it. And of course, I'm not alone. I have a great partner, Christian Shields, who's been with me for years since I met him actually at Miles Properties. He was the chief investment officer there, and we've started in my basement. We were one of those basement success stories after 2008. It looked like the end of the world. I remember going around and talking to capital sources, and they just laughed at us. There was no way they were going to give us any money at that time period. And we had to just knock on doors and get told no a hell of a lot.
I can imagine everybody. I was not really old enough I wasn't in the business back then, I should say. I definitely remember it. So I want to ask you some questions for sure about 2008, because that is, there's something about those catastrophic periods that end up being the most interesting content. I don't know if that's because we're suckers for pain or what it is, but it's always interesting to hear about. But first, let's start from the beginning. Like, put real estate to the side for a second. Where did you grow up? What were you like as a kid and up through high school?
Well, I actually grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I actually was big time into reading. Reading's always been one of my passions. And I actually joined the military right out of high school, and was a two-time combat vet. I was in Panama, Operation Just Cause, and Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And I was with the 82nd Airborne. Got out of the military and started a company called All American Realty, which was basically buying beat-up homes, HUD and VA homes. I got my real estate license, and we were renovating them and flipping them and doing that type of stuff. That didn't work out too well. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was very young and dumb, and basically ended up having to get a job as a property manager.
Sorry to interrupt you. Where'd that go wrong? When you say you didn't know what you were doing, what happened?
Oh, so the idea of being a realtor sounds really appealing, but when you actually have to go around and show people, and I was very young, And it was very frustrating because I would show a house 5, 6, 7, 8 times and people couldn't make up their minds. And it was very frustrating for me. So I think it's more, I'm very number driven. I like metrics, and it was very hard for me. The wife was never happy. The husband really didn't care. It was this back and forth, and being a realtor is totally different. And you have to fit what you're going to do in your career with what really works for you and your personality. And being a realtor in that stage there was not a great fit for me.
I mean, you are very numbers driven. I know that from your content and just from talking to you. But I
Mhm.
think you're also very you don't, there's people that get too stuck in the numbers, and
Mhm.
I know you're a student of human behavior as well. How have you always been like that, or did that take some time to get out of the spreadsheet and understand that
Mhm.
part of the game as well?
I'm a recovering numbers addict. I was basically in charge of accounting, the financial side of the business, and I thought numbers were everything. And I definitely went down that path, thinking that I could put measurements to everything. And then I started learning more about Charlie Munger in particular and his thought processes and how he thought. And I started seeing the flaws in the modeling. And I remember once I had this Monte Carlo stimulation where I had all these analysis and I was showing all the people, and I had all this math, and people were looking at me like, what is all this? It was almost precision is the best way to describe it. So I definitely had an awakening. And then when I started having to manage a lot more people, I realized that it was much more important to focus on the people side of the equation and how to get how to get their behaviors to match what I wanted to happen. And that was a learning. I was making up as I went. I didn't have a handbook or a guide to do it. And the company grew so fast. I was thinking about it this morning. Someone had asked me a question about the biggest constraints and the things that cause the most pain. And I thought to myself, well, it really depends on what stage your business is at. If you're a new big business, you're in the survival stage. Do you have enough cash coming in, enough sales to meet your payroll? And there's nothing that'll keep you up more than knowing you don't have enough money for payroll. And I've had it happen to me several times, and it's a terrible situation to be in. And then as you start growing, you get into this growth phase. And the growth phase is a totally different thing. With the growth phase, you yourself are usually the biggest problem because your skill sets don't match the growing business. And having those skill sets and being able to address those concerns and deal with those issues. And then, of course, you get to the plateau where you're basically, you start chasing every shiny object. You start looking at everybody else's P&L saying, oh, we can do that too. We can vertically integrate. We can do this. We can do that. And then you have the down. Unfortunately, I've been on that as well. And that's a painful, painful process to go through as well.
Yeah, how do you manage that? Because you've been a bit of a chameleon, like you said. You've been in the the finance side of the business, the capital raising, the operations. Is that just a case of you at varying times figuring out one of those things, one of those areas of the business was your highest and best use, or what caused you to? You've done all these different things. Why did you jump around to each of them? Because a lot of people either don't want to do that or they don't have the skill set to be able to do all those things.
It's a fascinating thing, and I'll bring it up to when I was hiring for a chief financial officer. We went through and we did this elaborate interviewing process. And, I'm a high school dropout, so I had no formal training with this. And I was like, okay, well, I got this guy. He's got a CPA. He's from Rutgers. He's, very successful. He works at a big REIT. I didn't test him at all. I figured this guy's going to know way more than me. He's going to be way more sophisticated. And I hired him and we brought him in. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. And what I call it is silo rot. So you get a guy, very smart guy, but all he did was work on a particular set of accounting. And that rotted his brain. Some people call it QuickBook rot, where you don't really understand accounting. You don't really understand how all the numbers work. Because of me and my insecurities, I had to understand every aspect of it. So I would rip apart balance sheets, income statements. I would take I would take broker packages and rebuild them from Excel just for fun. That would be something I would do is take I can make it look just like this. So I learned VBA. I taught myself all this stuff because I wanted to understand. So I was much more driven to understand. And I think what happens in business is we get siloed. We go to work and we're working in acquisitions. Well, the acquisition guy doesn't understand operations, or he doesn't
Yeah.
understand accounting, or he doesn't understand HR. But when you're the owner and you have everything responsible hitting you, you have to really go out and figure that stuff out. The buck stops with you.
Yeah, I think, and there's two schools of thought on that. There's like the classic E-Myth model, which is
Hmm.
like get everything out of your hands as quick as possible,
Hmm.
scale, you need to replace yourself over and over.
Mhm.
And there's some merit to that. You can't
Yep.
scale if you're the bottleneck in your own business. But
Mhm.
I'm a huge advocate of, like, especially people. So to talk specifically real estate, I
Mhm.
think we still do it. We've built in-house management. I
Yeah.
think people should self-manage their first few properties. I don't
Mhm.
believe in the hand it to property management immediately, because I think you
Mhm.
want to, exactly what you're describing, learn just kind of how things work every day and how your business operates. Then you can pass it, and you can you can let somebody else run the minutia, but at least understand what's going on. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. I think that's great. I think that people really should self-manage. They should learn all the issues, all the concerns, because when you're looking at a P&L or you're looking at a policy and procedures manual, you think that's what's happening. But what's
Yeah.
actually happening, there's this big gap. And when you go to the site, you'll see it. And you're like, wait a minute, the policy says we should do X, Y, and Z, but we go out to the site and they're not doing that. And the bigger the company, the wider the gap. I've seen it again and again. Now, one of the issues you have with self-managing is there's a cost ratio. So at some point, self-managing makes financial sense. Most people look at self-management and say, oh, we can make all this money. The margins on property management companies, 8 to 12%, if you're lucky. And that depends on if you staff it properly. You're either understaffed or overstaffed, because do you have the proper training? Do you have an audit function? Do you have the right staffing? How lean are your regionals? Are you spreading them too thin? There's all these, you have an HR department, what's your training department? There's all these different variables that go into it. And people look at it. I do know this. There's this cycle we go through. When you start buying a lot of units, you start getting really frustrated because you start finding the management company is doing more managing you than they are managing the asset. They're trying to temper your expectations. They're trying to say, oh, well, this is how we always did it, or this is making you question yourself. And if you don't know what you're talking about, then of course, that's a real problem. And that's why you have to ask those questions. And I think what you're talking about here is critical. You have to know how to do the stuff. It doesn't mean you're the expert at it, but at least you have some understanding of it.
So let's get into your story. Let's go to that 24 unit.
Mhm.
How you were talking about, you're there, you're cleaning the toilets, you're deep in the weeds, learning the game. How
Mhm.
old were you? How did you even come upon this role where you managing this 24 unit?
So it's funny. I was big time into Nothing Down by Robert Allen and all these. I wanted to be a millionaire before I was 30, and I definitely achieved that. But I wanted to be super successful. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I went out there. I had no clue how to do any of it, but I had no framework because I came from the military. And the military, like, people talk about working hard. And I have this framework. Really? You think what we're doing in the civilian world is hard? Like being out in the, hiking through the jungle with, 100-degree temperature, people shooting at you, all these terrible things. And I'm like, this is a joke. I get paid to do this. So when they put me in the property was, I think it was like 80 something percent occupied. And I would lease it. Someone would call me at 8, 9 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I would come on over. Sure. Show it. And I would look at the expenses and I'd say, wait a minute. The paint cost $250 to paint it. A bucket of paint is $20. How about the move-in fee was only $100? I said, I tell you what, I'll give you the bucket of paint. Let them paint it themselves. I was saving money. So I was constantly looking at things saying, well, why are we spending this? Asking all these questions. And that got the attention of the owner. And we had these conversations, and they were using this manual payroll. Everything was by hand. They had no computer system. Now, I actually was very good with computers. I had a Mac early on. I was big time into computers, and I thought I could learn computers. So we bought this software called DAC Easy Accounting, and I set up the accounting system for them. And I was able to automate. And imagine, having a computer. So this is a funny story. When I was in the military, I had the Apple II. C plus, I think it was what it was. And manually, they had something called the training NCO. And I was like a private and I was in there because I had a computer. No one else had a computer. All the other training NCOs had typewriters. So every morning they had to type up 134 names and type it and put this status report in. With a computer, I just changed the 2 or 3 numbers and hit print. So what took them 30, 40 minutes to do, I did it in a few minutes. And of course, I was able to just run circles around everybody because I had this advantage of technology that they didn't have. And I think the same thing applied here. So I went into a company that was not computerized. They did not have the accounting systems, did not have the processes. And I went and got a book, Accounting for Dummies. and went through it line by line and said, okay, this isn't too difficult. And, started building everything out based on all the books I read. I went and got every book I could find at the library and started really learning it and writing notes and trying to figure out how to do it. So self-taught.
I mean, there's so many parallels there because you're the real estate guy, but you're the AI guy too. Like
Oh,
you're at the cutting edge of all that stuff. I mean, it's
yeah.
impossible to not see the parallels between what you were doing, what using a computer while others were using typewriters, and what I
Mm,
see that you're
yeah.
doing with AI these days. Have you always been that way where you see something that you think is the next, because you talk about it, you just go buy like I bought a book and I just figured it out and did it. Have you just always been like that? You see something that you think's the next big thing and you just go dive in and learn all you can about it?
I definitely like the challenge. I think most people, when they see a project or I got to learn how to do AI. The better course would be, I have a project. How do I use AI to make that project happen? Because then you have a goal and some
Yeah.
point that you're trying to learn. So like with accounting, I had a project. I had to figure out how to set up a company on accounting, and I didn't know how to do it. So I got the software, pulled it up, got the books, stayed up late, figured it out, and put it on there. I remember the networking when we had the RJ45 cables and we had the Dell Array servers. I called a company to give me a bid to install it. It was like $50,000 many years ago. And I was like, that's insane. We can't afford it. So I got the books, stayed up all night, getting it all together, ran the lines myself, hooked everything up, and we had a network in the home office. So it was just a matter of taking whatever the challenge was and attacking it. Now it's so much easier with AI. What we have now, it's insane because we can go to the AI, learn how to prompt it correctly. What's even more important, most people think they need to learn how to prompt. What they really need to do is ask the AI to help them get better at prompting, because the AI, it will be better prompting than you could ever be. So I always tell the AI, hey, here's my initial prompt. Write a better prompt. And I actually have different custom GPTs that actually go in and actually, I call it the battle of the bots, where I have 2 or 3 different prompt engineers going back and forth and rating each other, and gives me this is the best prompt for it. So it's crazy the difference I can get from the results from somebody else. I'll see people's, oh, this is what I ran, and I'll say, well, this is what I got, and they're like, whoa, where'd you get all that from?
Mhm.
It's all the context and how you build the prompt out, and the AI can do it for you.
What's like so you're at a pretty advanced state with AI. What
Mm.
about people, and we won't do a whole AI podcast.
Yeah,
I want to ask you more real estate
yeah.
stuff, although they are overlapping a lot these days. What can people do who maybe feel, so here's an example. I was advised, because I wasn't using AI when it first came out, and I knew
Mhm,
I knew I needed to. And
mhm,
the simplest advice I got was just have AI, whatever you use. For me, was usually Chat GPT. Just
mhm.
have it open on your second screen and just have it in your face all the time, and that'll force you to start using it. Can you think, are there any other kind of simple hacks you can advise to people that maybe are a little behind the curve when it comes to AI?
I would say one of the first things I would do is go to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever software you're using and tell it your industry, give it context. So the most important thing when prompting is context. The more it knows about you, the better the output will be. And there's actually custom instructions you can do as well inside of all the ChatGPTs or the AIs. You can go in and say, I'm a real estate investor, I'm a property manager, I'm an accountant, whatever it is. The more it knows about you, the better it will be. Once you've built the context, then you have the AI. You say to it, okay, in my career or in my business as an owner, what's the most important thing for me to learn with AI? Help me build a training plan. Recommend videos, recommend tapes, recommend anything you can find on the internet. And here's one of the most important things. Give me specific projects that would relate to my business, because you're going to have way more accountability. Most people get bored sitting there through videos,
Yeah.
watching. But if you know you've got something where you're trying to build something, now you're searching for that clue. And you say, I've got to find it. I got to figure out how to make this work. And you can spend hours doing that because you're trying to complete it or figure it out. Whereas if you're just trying to learn something, master it, well, good luck with that. Most people get bored and they move on. But if you have a project you're working on, tying it to a project where you're using it on a consistent basis, like I have multiple ChatGPTs, I have workflows I use, I have all sorts of different things. And I'm always saying to myself, how can I use AI to make my life easier? That's really what I'm using it for, to make my life easier. And I think sometimes people like they think, oh, well, AI can just write for me. Yeah, it can, but you're not going. The whole benefit of writing, and you're an excellent writer. I mean, you're a way better writer than I am. But
Oh, thank you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. The whole thing about writing is thinking on paper. It's your process, and the writing forces you to think things through and list it out and think through all your arguments. Now you can use AI as a writing companion, So what I do is I use Whisperflow. Are you familiar with Whisperflow?
No.
Oh, it's really cool. I try, you talk to your computer and a lot of the dictation doesn't work. Whisperflow is an app. It's not expensive. I think what's it, $8 or $9 a month or something like that. But Whisperflow allows you to speak like we're speaking right now, and then it records everything that you're saying, and then it comes in and removes the pauses, the ums, the ahs, all that out, and puts it in a coherent structure based on your tone and your style. And it's verbatim. It gets everything. And then I drop that into the chat GPT and say, okay, now edit it for grammar, look for stupid things and that type of stuff. And then that really allows you to speed up. It's actually replaced the keyboard. Now, when I send emails, I just go to Whisperflow and just talk to it like I'm having a conversation with you. Hey, I need to send an email. I just did one this morning where I was sending an email to the regional manager about all the follow-up items that I had in my Notion task database. I copied and pasted them, dropped them in there and said, okay, let's go through each one of these. And I just sat here and discussed like I'm having a conversation with you. And it was done. I had this beautiful email, color-coded, organized, and I hit send. And that would have taken me an hour. It took me 10, 15 minutes to do it. So it definitely saves time. It's fascinating. So I definitely would use the AI to create a training plan. And the core thing of the training plan is to make sure you have real projects that you really want to learn something, because that's when it's really going to stick when you're using it. And if you say, hey, I want to be better at, I want to learn how to use N8N automation software. To what end? What are you going to use it for?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to use Claude Skills. Okay, great. What specifically are you going to use it for? And why would you use it? Or MPCs or all these other different things you can use. Well, why? What are you going to do with it? And if you don't have a really good answer for it, then you're wasting your time. Because I always say, what's useful? That's the whole thing. I had this conversation the other day with somebody, and I said to him, no matter what it is, at the end of the day, if you can tell me something that I get that's useful, that can change my behaviors, then that's something I want to learn. That's something I want to do. But if it's just for entertainment or education, well, I mean, that's fun, but it's not the same thing as actually making me better or improving me in some way.
Yeah, that's such good. I mean, it's just getting out of the theoreticals of like
Yeah.
how I could use something instead of let's just learn it by doing it. And there's a ton of overlap. Like I'll
Hmm.
have, I'm sure you get, you've been doing this much
Hmm.
longer than I have. But when you talk to people who are newer investors, I'll ask them like, how long have you been learning for? Have you made any offers?
Hmm.
No, you've read $20 and you've listened to every Bigger Pockets episode that was ever recorded, but you haven't made an offer yet. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what I tell you because you have to go. You're operating in the theoretical right now, and it's
Yeah.
no different with what you're describing.
Hmm.
Um, so okay, so you're working at this 24 unit, and then you end up. I don't know if it was the same company, but you end up managing or operating 23,000 units, correct? Take us
Yes.
from the 24 unit to the 23,000.
Uh, that was the explosive growth phase. The company grew like crazy, and we bought properties all over the place. We started a development arm where we were building beautiful high rises for the lender. We didn't realize it was for the lender in foreclosure, but in 2008, of course, we had 35 foot story. I mean, it was beautiful, 34-story high rise in downtown Tampa, St. Pete. We had a cigar factory. We had all these beautiful buildings that they were building all over the place. And the company was just exploding, growing. I mean, there was 700 plus employees. I think there were 753 for the whole company, and 700 of them reported to me. So I was the right-hand man for the CEO of the company, and the company grew very quick. During that time period, when we first started, CEO, he was delivering Chinese food. So he wasn't successful. But he was driven. I'll give him that. He was very driven. He was a much more aggressive individual. He was a huge risk taker, and he had an incredible sense of urgency. I'll tell you a funny story about him. And this is kind of one of the things that shaped me early on. It was Halloween night, and we had a major plumbing backup in 3 units. There was, 3 or 4 inches of raw sewage. This is my first time dealing with this. I'm pulling out the phone book, calling every single plumber I can get my hands on, wetback extraction companies and all that. The owner shows up, and I'm just so happy these people came. And the bill was like $39.50 or something. He went crazy. This is a ripoff. I can't believe you charged me this much. And he just went nuts. And I was just mortified. I was like, I'm just glad they showed up. How can you say that?
This
He
is
was
the
able to get the building.
CEO. This is the
Yeah.
CEO going nuts.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. He went nuts, and he did get a big discount. And they were definitely gouging because it was a holiday weekend and everything else. And it was a mindset shift for me to be thinking, okay, I'm just thinking I want the problem solved. And he's thinking he wants the problem solved at a reasonable price. And that mindset really helped me. It was one of the core things. Hey, sense of urgency. You want to get the problem fixed immediately, and you want to ask for the discount. And I will forget. I mean, he went crazy on that guy. I can't believe you're trying to rip me off. You're trying to, and I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. He showed up. Why are you yelling at him? Uh, but it definitely was something I learned. So, wow, I see now that I need to be thinking like that because that's how owners think. Every dime is critical, and they're thinking about all these expenses. And I think sometimes the employees on site they lose sight of that's someone's real money that they've invested, or the lender. We have all these expenses that we have to pay out, and everything adds up. So we have to be thinking about how can we. I always say it comes down to drive revenue and reduce costs. Those are the two core things that we can do. And that's what we should always be. How can we drive revenue on this property? How can we reduce cost?
How do you get employees to think that way though? Because I mean, I don't need to I don't need to school you on Charlie Munger. I know you've read all of his stuff, but
Uh-huh.
you know his classic quote. I mean, he's got a lot of classics, but you know,
Mhm.
show me the incentive, I'll show you the behavior. And the
Mhm.
employees are getting paid the same, whether the NOI is better or worse this month. So how do you build that in? I guess from a cultural standpoint to get people to care about something like that.
Well, a couple of things you can do. One, obviously, is you can have different actual areas of compensation. So a lot of companies definitely do it just based on NOI or some other variation. I always like to separate it out because you want to have it directly attributable. So leasing goals obviously are easy to tie back to and I like to do group bonuses, not just individual. Of course you have individuals just to be competitive in the market. The problem with individual goals is they just stab each other in the back, and you create, instead of teamwork, you create backstabbing because everybody's fighting for that
Uh-huh.
extra lead to get that extra $500 bonus. But if I make it a group thing and they all pull together, it's kind of like a swarm kind of concept. Well, the same thing can apply to the other sides of the equation. So for the property manager, you can bifurcate the NOI or the expense side. Here's the issue with that. And I've seen this, I think I've even wrote about this. If there's a major plumbing breakdown or a roof problem or some other deferred capital event, that's incredibly demotivating. The manager didn't have any control over that. Yet their bonus dollars are being impacted because of something totally outside of their control. Now the owner, hey, that's the game we took. So if,
Yeah.
if a roofing problem happens, we took it. The manager didn't. So I would always adjust for non-controllable things and not penalize the property manager for those types of things. So we would do variance request off the budget so that they would have some chance. So the other thing that happens too with bonuses and budgets, I'm actually getting I know it's that time of year where we're doing budgets for next year, is we do the budgets and then we expect them to be accurate 12 months into the future. Well, usually here's what happens. You sandbag it and they're blowing the heck out of the numbers and they hit their numbers all the way down, or it's so aggressive that they'll never hit it. And then of course it becomes very demotivating.
Yeah.
So I think bifurcating the bonus structures is one way to do it. That's one. Number two is inspections. Now, if they know that you're checking on stuff, you'll be amazed at how much better they are. And also, some of the compensation doesn't have to be monetary. It can be just, hey, that's a great job. I really appreciate you taking the time for that. A lot of people don't even feel like their bosses say, hey, I appreciate that. That means something. It means something to me when I was young and I was on site and someone would recognize something that I did, like, wow, we appreciate that, Ken. So that it still works. So I think those inspections and going out to the sites, for the first 7 years at the old company, the owner and I, we would go out every weekend. We had 10,000 plus units in Atlanta, Georgia, and every weekend we would drive out to different properties. We would do site inspections. We would talk to the staff. We would do different things and that type of stuff. So it was being out there, being visible, them seeing you at the site, them knowing you care. It puts a face to the corporation and they know you're a real person and that you care about them, that you know who they are, that you hear their issues. And one of the things that I always did when I showed up is, okay, what's the stupidest thing we make you do? And they would look at me, and I never will forget this. This is one of the great stories. It's just classic. The company was big at the time. And I went out to the site. I said, what's the stupidest thing we make you do? And she looked at me. She says, Ken, this month-end report, it takes hours. Do we really have to do this? So I grabbed this report reminder. I said, okay, let me go take it in. So I went over to training, and I said, hey, why do we make them do this? He said, oh, we don't do that. Accounting makes them do that. So I went over to accounting, and accounting said, we don't make them do that. Training does. So we had an old system. We had transferred the old system over, and there was a transitional period where they had to make all this backup material, but no one ever cut it off. So they just
Mhm.
kept doing it. So those hours were never back. We lost them because it was just stupid. So that's an example of just stupidity. And it's in every organization. Again, that's the gap between what you think's happening and what's really happening at the site. And the bigger the organization, the more you see that stuff.
That's so good. I try to think about that all the time because I've had my business for a number of years, but I was in
Mhm.
corporate till a little over 2 years ago. And I always think about that. Like when I was an employee, what was the stuff they made us do that I hated and
Yep.
that it sort of not just that I hated, but drove zero revenue,
Yep.
for any purpose other than somebody wanting to check a box or something. And
Yep.
I just, hopefully do all right, do my best to cut any of that stuff out. So from your this company, 3,000 units at your peak,
Hmm.
and things went sideways, which isn't a unique story to 2008. I don't think you
Yep.
guys were the only ones. So I'm always curious. We hear real estate's somewhat of a cyclical business, and '08 is hopefully a
Hmm.
once in a lifetime, but you don't know. Did you, other than the classic lessons that we get around over leveraging or debt durations and things like, was there anything from that period that you learned about how to prepare for an inevitable downturn that maybe isn't as maybe that we wouldn't think of or we haven't heard about before?
I would say this, a couple of things. Number one, you have to sell assets to recycle cash, and that helps your track record. And you're going to look back and say, I was an idiot. I can't believe I sold the deal. I could have made so much more. But having that track record, having that cash build is critical, and building reserves. So having large reserves on all your properties is so important. When we do deals, we make sure that we account for every dollar of operating reserves that are required, all the tax escrows, the insurance escrows, all of it has to be pre-funded at closing. We make sure we have those dollars accounted for. Next is contingency. When you're doing construction in particular, especially when it's unknown construction, things that are like if you're doing ground up construction, you've done 100 deals like that, exact same thing in the exact same area, then maybe you have more for your site work or your horizontal, but less for your vertical because you have those down to the penny. But when you're doing an adaptive use or a rehab or something like that, there should be different levels of contingency. So we first have the general contingency, which is most people have. They have 5 to 10%. Uh, I always like to say the more bid out your scope is, the tighter your contingency can be. But if you haven't done a real good homework on all those bids, then you need to have a wider contingency. So that's one. Two is scope contingency. So, hey, we're going to put in marble deck here, but hey, we can always step back and do, something else instead of maybe a different coating and really save money. So that's a scope contingency where we say, oh, you know what? We went over here. We're going to hit, these are things that we value engineer. People call it value engineering. So we can immediately go back to those if we have to. And then I do line item contingencies because it's been my experience when you have a particular, I'll give you a great example of this. We were installing in a Nashville, it was an old hotel that had been converted to apartments, and it was 1920 construction, beautiful property, Blackstone and Lee. And we were going in and pulling out the cabinetry for the kitchen and the bathrooms. And we did the numbers, and I had set aside extra money just being cautious because it was such an old building. The pipes we connected to were collapsing. So we had to repipe and put this special sleeve on to even connect to the existing plumbing structure. And that was a big cost. And I'm glad I had that line item contingency because I didn't know. And it's not like during the initial stage of it that you can actually do a test prototype. When you start doing your scope, you're saying, oh, this is the cost. We're going to rip it out. You know what the cost of a countertop is. You know what the cost of the cabinetry is and everything else. But then when you start doing the actual work, oh, wait a minute, there's asbestos underneath here. Well, you should have seen that in your due diligence report that you knew it. But hey, on the reports you had, it wasn't there. Well, it's here. So now you have, so this kind of stuff pops up all the time. So that would be definitely, I would take more chips off the table. I would definitely have massive reserves, make sure you have accounted for working capital, and then I would definitely have more contingency. And the other thing I would tell you is we've already talked about leverage. The amount of leverage that people use, usually they're desperate because they don't want to have to go raise even more equity. But when things go bad, and inevitably at some point they will, you need to make sure you stress test the hell out of the deal and you have really good staying power because it's not a matter of, if it happens, it's just a matter of when it happens. And who knows if it's 2008 or something worse or something better. We just don't know. That's why you have to be so sensitive about the locations. And that's something I definitely will not touch are the Class Cs and the undesirable locations. It's not worth the headache. It's not worth the brain damage.
Yeah, we're so constantly, especially when you're starting out, everybody's
Mhm.
tells you like you need to buy and hold forever. So that's
Mhm.
always, it's kind of pitched as like this is what the sophisticated people do. The people that
Mhm.
are flipping, those are the amateurs. When
Mhm.
in fact, there's always a time to sell. And like you
Mhm.
said, we've all, I worked for a guy
Mhm.
in Portland who was a big real estate investor. I remember we'd always be driving around Portland and he would like point to he bought mostly single family homes, but
Mhm.
he'd point to some house and be like, oh man, if I'd kept that thing, it
Yeah.
tripled in price, but they ignore the opportunity cost or
Yep.
the risk management that comes with that. Like, well, what did you sold it, but did you use it to buy something better, or did you
Hmm.
use it to prevent a catastrophe in your portfolio? And that's such
Hmm.
a good lesson that I don't think we're pitched when we
Hmm.
first start out in this business.
Yeah. Well, if you have institutional wealth or you're a family office and you want to hold a downtown Manhattan building, or you want to hold some downtown corridor building in some great city with an incredible, like downtown Athens, for example, student housing, that's an incredible A+ market. If that university goes down, we probably need to be worried about bullets and beans at that point. So that type of location, sure, you can. We own one downtown, beautiful. We made a lot of money on it, and of course now they're trying to sell it for way more than what we owned it for. But I would simply say this: you have to have the wealth to be to sit there and just collect the coupons, and that's a different game. So I'm a value add. I go in and people, oh, what's value add? Well, value add is where you can actually add managerial upside. You can do renovations to increase the value, or it's just operationally distressed. And that's where you get significant IRRs. Like our initial IRR for QR Capital was our average blend was like 24 IRR for our deals. And average hold was probably almost 4 years, 4.5 years. Early on, though, the IRRs were like 70 something. It was crazy because we were buying stuff so cheap back then. Now, I wouldn't buy that same asset class again if we do have something like that. We're going to focus on much better asset quality, A and B product. I'm actually looking at multiple deals right now that are foreclosed. I'm seeing brand new 2023 construction, and it's being traded for the note value, 30-40% less in some cases than what the appraised value was. So just a few years ago. So it's happening. What you're describing, the 2008 kind of thing, it's a slow burn because the extend and pretend is running out.
Hey guys, we're taking a quick break, but before we get back into it, if you're enjoying this episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us to keep bringing you more valuable content. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget to leave a review. Please, it makes a huge difference. All right, let's get
Running
back to
out.
it.
And we're starting to see deals. And what we're seeing now is loan packages being sold. I'm actually reviewing them with some of my institutional partners, and we're seeing more and more of these deals pop out and I underwrote one and I was like, you know what? Even if we pay less than the loan balance, it just doesn't work because the debt's so different. The rents that they want, everything's wrong. Everything they assumed in the perfect weather is no longer, it doesn't apply. So now it's not worth even a fraction, and the construction costs are 300,000 plus a unit. It might be worth 225.
Yeah, so you mentioned perfect weather. A lot of people, there was perfect weather in, late 2020, all of 21, maybe even early 22. Were you able, because you're very careful, I don't know if careful is the word, but you're very diligent with your numbers, and there weren't a lot of deals that made sense during that
Mhm.
time. Did you sit on the sidelines, or were you able to keep buying during that period?
We were primarily sitting on the sidelines. There was one or two deals that we did that were very special cases. There was a deal that we bought in. Again, they all have a story, and I'm very much a story buyer. There was a deal in downtown Savannah, an old HUD deal that
Oh,
we
I love
actually,
Savannah. Sorry to hop
yeah,
in.
yeah,
One of my favorite cities.
yeah, it's great. Well, it was called Chatham Apartments, and we actually bought it. But get this, during the due diligence process, we went and met with the architect, actually worked with SCAD on other projects, and SCAD wanted to buy the building. But SCAD could not buy the building because they couldn't have the reputational damage of kicking out all these the older people that were
Uh,
on Section 8 and homeless. So we bought the building with a guaranteed purchase price from them just to vacate the building. One of the best deals I ever did because the turnaround, the IRR was insane there. But we were able to get a huge loan because we had a $5 million earnest money deposit from SCAD, and we actually executed. We got everybody relocated them successfully. We brought in a relocation expert. We paid for moving dollars and gave them relocation expenses and things of that nature. And we were able to get, and by the way, happened during the middle of COVID, which of course was terrifying. And we were able to empty the building out and sell it to SCAD. And that was an example of the type of distressed deal. And it had all sorts of problems with it. Now we were prepared to renovate it and make it a Class A. And of course, that's what SCAD's done with it now. It's a beautiful building now, so it looks great.
do you think you would have had that level of discipline earlier on in your career to mostly sit out when you saw conditions like that?
I would say that 2008 fundamentally changed me. Having lost so much so quickly, everything in my partner's the same way. He went through the same experience. So we're nervous Nellies. So and we like heavy lifts. We like problem deals. We don't mind going in and doing the heavy lifts, but we want a particular story. I call it the Goldilocks story. I'll give you an example. We closed a deal June of this year that met the Goldilocks story. So it was a deal that was foreclosed on in 2019. It was in Johnson City, Tennessee. It was a 576 bed student housing deal. And I think their all-in construction cost was over $40 million. We paid all in $26 million for it. Okay, it just got an appraisal for over $50 million. So this type of thing, now it requires a lot of work. It's not there yet. That's once we stabilize it, we have to clean it up. There's tremendous, but here was the interesting part about it. The comp across the street, it was $117 higher, but it was an older, inferior asset. This property has simply been mismanaged. It was great bones. That's the kind of inefficiency that exists in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find that type of inefficiency, there's tremendous value to be created. But you have to be incredibly patient and just sit and wait for your pitch. You do not have to, but a lot of people, they're like sharks. They have to do deals to support their overhead and their structure. So they want to constantly put money out to make more. We don't have to do deals. We're very fortunate. So we'll sit as long as we need to until another great deal comes. And then we'll take the pit, we'll take the hit. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm not suggesting, look, we could buy a deal and it could be a disaster. This deal, next thing you know, the university says they're closing down and the deal's a piece of crap. So you never know until you exit what your return is going to be. So you hear great numbers. Well, until you close it and put the money in your pocket, you don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, I think there's something to that though, because it sounds like you're investing from a standpoint of you're investing based on things you can control. You've done countless value add projects and if I go in, I've done this before, I can raise the rents. I can't control what the market does. I can't control if something crazy happens. Like you said, they shut the university down, but you're not relying on cap rate compression or the market to rip or anything like that. You're really relying on what sounds like a model that you have executed time and time again over the years.
That's right. That's right. It's the value add model where you go in and you either managerial, renovation, and it could be reputational. In this case, it was all three. So I think the rehab was a little over 3.1 million, and we're coming on the end of the rehab. And we're doing cool things. We're doing murals. I've got permission from the university to put a 6-foot tall Bucky mural, which is their mascot at the pool deck. We have a Vegas style pool. The gym, it looks like a Gold's Gym. So we've done a lot of cool things. I've actually added a podcasting studio. So it's the first time I've actually installed a podcasting studio on a student housing deal. So we're really excited about it. We think it's going to be an incredible deal. And we're looking for a lot more. Like I said, I've actually was underwriting another 7 portfolio package of foreclosed Class A deals. And some are in Philly, some are in Arizona, some are in Ohio. So they're all over the place.
How do you build a network to get deals from? You're doing deals all over the country. Like, how are these coming across your desk?
Well, so our institutional partners who obviously buy a lot of debt, most of these are debt. Most of the deals we find and when bought in the past have been through broker relationships. So the brokers are going to send out deals. I mean, they're motivated to. Most lenders have to go through some sort of fiduciary process to sell the stuff. And you're going to get the emails. You're going to see it. If you sign up for the different debt funds, but buying debt is a whole different animal. It's terrifying. I'll be the first to tell you it's terrifying. So you can't inspect 100% of the units, which, that drives me nuts. I like to see everything. I like to get my scopes together. I like to get my management company all teamed up. I like to get people hired. I'll even eat payroll initially beforehand, just so I can get people trained and ready to go. So when we close, we're ready to start, because it's been my experience. As soon as you close the property, you lose a month or two just getting everybody up on the systems, the processes, and everything else, the utility billing and stuff like that.
So you've raised a ton of money in your career, and we have some operators that listen to this, and we have some LPs or potential LPs, and people that are looking at deals that come across their desk throughout the course of the year. What are maybe some things, speak to LPs here, that maybe they should be looking at or asking of GPs that perhaps they're not being diligent enough about?
Well, I think that you've seen a lot of this on LinkedIn recently. A lot of people are struggling to raise capital for their deals. And I think it's not that the operators are bad operators. I think it's the quality of deals they're doing. So I'm seeing negative leverage still. in a lot of cases where, negative leverage, it's hard to make a deal underwrite if you do that. I'm seeing people who don't have a lot of experience or a track record try to go out and raise, a large amount of capital. And that's very difficult to do. I think you're better off partnering with someone who has some experience and building a track record with them on a few deals. And then you can actually help get their investors with you, especially if they're quasi-institutional. So that's definitely something you can work on. I think also from an LP perspective, the underwriting that I've seen on a lot of the models, and people send me packages all the time, sometimes unsolicited, hey, do you want to invest in my deal? And the first thing I do is I look, do they have lost to old lease? Do they have gain to old lease? Do they have the proper closing cost? How are they actually, because closing costs is in the working capital is one of the biggest and easiest things I see people missing again and again and again. They don't have, like most management companies require you to have 2 or 3 months of operating cash sitting in the account. That drags your return. But if you don't have that cash, when the timing of payments and stuff come in, you're going to be short cash.
Yeah.
And I've lived that. And that is a terrible experience where you're having to move payables around because you can't pay people because you don't have the cash. So I would rather have too much cash and have a lower return and have the reserve there, because worst case scenario, you return the cash. We had a deal in Knoxville where there was a lot of unknowns and we didn't really know how much it was going to cost to do the exact renovation. So we actually over reserved by like $750,000. Now the returns were such that we bought it cheap enough. We returned the money back to the investors after 2 years when we were done with the renovations. And of course, the deal was a great deal for everybody. But that's the type of, it was a big deal. But when we're looking at this stuff, we're like, wow, what could go wrong? Where do we need to have extra reserves? And we really loaded up with reserves. And people say, well, that keeps you from doing a lot of deals. Yes, it does. But it also lets me sleep at night.
Yeah. And there's often two different skill sets. The people that are, sometimes people have both, like you're an example of that, but there are definitely people who are, let me just put it this way. Being good at raising capital doesn't make you good at operating deals. And, there are some maybe sophisticated investors that can see through that. Like if someone, sometimes they're a straight up charlatan, but other times they just aren't good at it, right? They're just, it's just not their skill set. I mean, is there any way to, I don't know, like fix this problem? I guess it's a tale as old as time. They always said, like, if you can sell, you're always going to make it, whatever industry you're in. And so, I mean, is that just kind of the way the world works? What do you think about that topic?
Yeah, no, I believe that the sales, I always call it in real estate, there are 3 primary drivers. There's raising capital, there's finding deals, and there's the execution phase. And the execution phase is fungible because you can hire a management company to do it. So most people think, or a renovation company to do it. Okay. So then you go back to the other 2. Finding the deals is mission critical. And then of course, raising the capital. And if you look at it, the people who make the most money are sitting closest to capital because obviously they have the power of leverage because they have their connections and they know the people and there's trust and they built these networks and it's incredibly valuable to have that connection and have that capital. And by the way, they make the lion's share of the returns. If you're looking at the capital stack and the pie and how it's divided among who gets what, those guys that can raise the capital, they have it. And that's a critical thing. Now, does that mean normally they should partner up with a great operator? And I'll tell you this, if they don't, they will soon learn how to be great operators when they're trying to explain to their investors why the deal they projected and all the performance and stuff. The other thing I felt too when it comes
or they just go find a new round of investors that don't know them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Look at a lot of the private equity groups. They do the same thing. So they basically bring in one group of investors and they seed it with other deals from somebody else and they buy it, whether it be companies or real estate. Whether or not the actual return is there or not remains to be seen. So we don't know because it's like a mark to market kind of thing. So you definitely see that in a lot of the Blackstone, non-traded, the public REIT things they have. So I see that as well. I've actually bought a few of those kind of deals too, where it's interesting after they failed or whatever it is, and you come in and buy them from a failed REIT, non-public traded REIT. It's kind of interesting.
So you mentioned when you were starting out, you're like, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, and you achieved that. So you were definitely very money motivated at that point. And I think sometimes we get pitched this idea that it's like bad to like money or bad to want to be rich. I don't see it that way at all. And in fact, I think it's a great endeavor if you have the right relationship with money.
Yeah.
Do you still consider yourself money motivated, or what gets you the most excited about this business and just getting out of bed in the morning and working.
I love learning new things. For me, it's curiosity. It's learning new things with AI now, and even working with the maintenance team, trying to figure out this new Freon system they have for refrigeration. There's always some new thing coming up, and saying, "Well, wow, why did that happen? How can we change that?" I'm also involved in renovation. I'm actually a licensed GC, which is kind of scary to think, but I actually did go through that whole process, and I've learned more about construction than I ever wanted to know. And we've done some ground up stuff, but it was very painful, and I don't recommend that to anybody. But hey, there are people that love it and they live for it. It's just I can do, 5 acquisition deals for one build up from the ground up because it's that much more intensive. It's that much more difficult, and there's so many additional risks associated with it. Whereas you can just, especially when the timing's right. And the biggest thing in my business is just having the patience not to, "Oh, I got to get a deal. I got to get a deal." It either meets your requirements or it doesn't. And you just go on to the next one. Next, next. And my acquisition guy, he's just like beating his head against the wall. We just look at deal after deal and you guys just kill it. It'll come. And when it comes, there'll be so many of them. And then the challenge will be raising the capital because at that point, no lender will want to step in. And all the equity will be hurt. They'll be taking, write downs and charge offs. They'll be thinking they're going to lose all their investment, and everybody will be terrified. And that is the most important time. At that point, you have to say, we're going to buy deals. And my partner and I said it. We looked at each other, if we just bought everything that was available in 2011, 2010, just everything, we would have made so much more money. Now, back then, of course, you didn't have debt, didn't have equity. There were no lenders. So it's very difficult. There's a great book. It's a stock book. It's called When It's Time to Buy, You Won't Want to. And it's just so true. And people, they're so conditioned now because we haven't really had a true recession since 2008. We've had a little dip in 2022, but not anything really bad. Atlanta, for example, used to have every 10 to 12 years, they would overbuild and there would be a major correction and you would see it. Well, because of what's going on with AI and the tech and everything else, we haven't really seen this real pain yet. You won't see it until you see unemployment spike. When unemployment spikes, that's when deals start really going back. Now, we're already starting to see a lot more deals go back, but that was because they financed it with, floating rate debt, and they thought the rates were going to stay low. And I'll give you a funny story on that. We had a floating rate deal. I've sold it. It was in Auburn. It was a 756 bed student deal in Auburn. And the cap that went on, we went to go to, hey, we got to price this cap out. It went from like 40 grand to like $590,000 or some ridiculous amount. And they were not going to let us tap our replacement reserve. They were not going to tap none of our reserves. It was crazy. We ended up refinancing it and selling it. And it was a very successful deal. But that type of pressure is upon everybody. And in that case, on that deal, we were actually able to increase the rents. I want to say it was a student deal. And basically, we went up like $47,000 a month in income. So we were able to really start driving the rents. And of course, that created tremendous value, which of course allowed us to sell it for a nice number and get a good return to our investors. But that was a scary time period. And, you were talking about COVID. I remember being terrified with my partners. I was running worst case scenarios saying, no debt service because we can do this abatement, but can we afford the payroll? Can we afford, the basics? And just looking at all these numbers and just running, oh my gosh, this is terrible. It was a terrifying time to be in real estate in 2020.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said before about not operating in the theoreticals. I always think of, when you're first kind of learning investing or finance, or you open like a Vanguard account or whatever, and
Yeah.
it'll ask you all those questions about your risk profile. Like if
Yeah.
the market dipped 30% next month, how would you behave? And everyone's like, oh, well, I would obviously buy more because I always buy the dip because I'm
Yeah.
smart. The only way to actually know what you will do is to go back and look at what you did in 2020 when COVID hit, or if you were
Yeah.
investing back then, go look at what you did. That's your risk profile, not the thing
Yeah.
that you filled out when you opened a Schwab account or whatever it is.
Absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
So I got to ask you, I'd be remiss not to. You are a published author, which first off, just huge respect for that. I know a number of people that have written books. My fiance is actually about to publish one here in the next few months, but I know everybody says it's one of the hardest things to do. Take us through. I mean, yeah, I'll just ask it that way. How hard
Yeah.
was it?
I would say this: you don't write a book, you rewrite a book. 8 sessions. It started off at 370 pages. It ended up at 179. Revision after revision after revision, the cutting, the changing, the moving. And now I look at the book and I say, you know what? That's a piece of trash. I would totally write a different book because I've learned so much since I've written it, especially about marketing. So that's probably where I really said, I have a real weakness in marketing and I really want to focus on it. So I've been reading every book I can find about marketing. Dan Kennedy, Alex Hormozy, all these different great leaders, Joseph Sugarman, everybody that's an expert in marketing, and trying to understand how I can apply that to multifamily to lease more effectively to increase the closing ratios, and learning, for example, how to do digital ads and all this kind of stuff. So I would say this, the act of writing a book is so painful. And now people say, oh, you can just have the AI do it. No, you can't. No, you can't. You can have the AI create an outline and you can have the AI put some flop out. But what gives the book meaning are your stories and all the pain and all the things that you've done. That's what you would probably be an incredible writer of a book, because you would sit down and think about, here's my outline and here's the stories. Here I'm going to tie it together. And stories are what we remember. I mean, if you read a book, what do you remember from a book? So if we get a book, it's like, hey, this is a great book, but what do I actually truly remember from the book? And most people, they'd be lucky, depending on how long ago you read the book, would you remember anything from the book? Now, if it's a narrative book, you might remember it. But if it's a business book, it's just so hard to remember books. So like this is a book about, I remember this is a book about cash flow forecasts, and it's a financial book, and it, breaks it all down and gives you all these different things. And I read this a long time ago. And what it did is I actually took this and turned it into an actual Excel model based on what he said. So now I have that. But if I look at one of these other books up here, okay, here, this one here, Patton. Okay, this book here, what I remember from this book are some of the stories of incredible leadership this guy had. This guy was an amazing leader. And also he was a scholar. And I didn't realize, when you think Patton, scholar, what are you talking about? He was an incredible scholar, and it just really stuck with me. So this is a great book. So there's so many wonderful books, but if we're lucky, if we actually remember or one thing from a book that we read many years ago, and like, oh yeah, this is what I read. And by the way, this is what I got from the book that's going to change my behavior. Because most times we read a book, no behavior change, then it was just entertainment.
Yeah, that's the old, we were talking before we hopped on air about Morgan Housel. I mean, that's always his line, right? Is best story wins. You can throw all these statistics out there. I mean, you see, politicians are experts at it for better or worse. Sometimes it's stories are what stick with people. If you can't wind a narrative around it, no one's gonna remember the numbers that you put in there. And that goes for writing, public speaking, any form of communication. That's just how our lizard brains work. We remember stories.
Investor pitches, same way.
Yeah.
Any type of thing, people will remember the story more than they'll remember the actual, what was the exact percentage of rental increase? What was the IRR? What was those? Now, you may have to check the box on whatever your box is, but that's why I always talk to my acquisition guy. What's the story? Before I even get interested, what's the story? And if the story's not there, well, there's no reason to even begin, because I'm looking for a particular fact pattern. If it doesn't meet my fact pattern, I don't even want to talk about it. Nope, dead, next deal.
So what is your fact pattern? Like, I'm sure it varies deal to deal, but give me some ideas.
Yeah. So one of the fact patterns that we look for, obviously, is we want to be dealing primarily with lenders now, especially if it's possible. If you have someone who bought a deal in 2014 or something and they're trying to sell, there could be a potential play there. But we're looking for primarily lenders now, because anybody that you're buying from in 2021, 2022, you're bailing them out. And I don't want to be when the music stops, I don't want to be the one sitting there with their keys at their price, at their basis. So that's the first thing we look for, is like, who are we dealing with? The other thing I don't like is, I learned this a long time ago. You do not want to buy from super sharp operators. So if let's say you're the expert you're in Oregon, right? Is that where you're at?
I live in New York, but invest in Oregon. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's say that I'm coming up and I want to buy in Oregon, and you're selling a deal. All right. My first thought is, well, why is he selling this deal? If there's so much upside, why is he selling this deal? Now, maybe there's a reason. He's just trying to recycle your capital, like I was, and these other people have made a lot of money. But I've always seen that super sophisticated operators, sometimes when they're selling their deals, they're not necessarily selling their best. They're trying to get rid of the ones that are bad. Not always. Like, obviously, we sold. Yeah. So I was just like, hey, I don't want to do that. The next fact pattern I look for is, I do not want to have to rely upon general market. The rent's going to drive 3%, and that's where my growth's going to come from. No. I want to see, hey, this deal has been mismanaged. There's an occupancy gain where I can actually drive occupancy. I can reduce concessions, and it's real, by the way. It's not the bullshit broker stuff where they go in and jack the rents up, and you see this huge lost old lease, and they don't even report it. And then you see the gap between it's funny. You take your rent roll and you look at your performance, and you're like, wow, there's $100 difference between the two starting day one. Well, how are we going to magically bridge that? You have to make sure it accounts for. That's why I see this lost old lease as just another word for concessions. So you got to make sure that that fact pattern is there and it's fitting there. So we definitely are looking for where we can add value. The next thing we look for, obviously, is renovations. There's two different types of renovations. There's value add upgrade where you're going at kitchen cabinets, granite countertops, stainless steel. You get a return on that investment. The roof, that's deferred maintenance.
Hmm.
If I don't do the roof, then I end up with leaks and I end up with less residents, but it's not necessarily a return on my investment, so to speak. Bringing up down units, that's a return on investment because it's down and it's got to be factored into the underwriting as well. The other thing we're looking for are operational inefficiency. So let's say we see, wow, the water cost on this property in Atlanta is $2,700 a unit. That is ridiculous. There's massive leak on this property. We know it. Let's part of our due diligence. Of course, during due diligence, we would find it. I would pay for all these expert plumbers and engineers to try to figure out where the leaks went. I've actually done that where we bought a deal, incredibly high water cost, and we were able to solve that water problem. So we're looking for specific things so we can go in and say, hey, this is a problem, and here's how we can add value by management upside. Bad debts are incredibly high. Well, why is it incredibly high? Is it for class B? Well, then that means management. You go and you talk to the manager. Oh, we don't like the property I just bought. They were only allowed to file one eviction a month. Like what? They had all these people who didn't pay them, but they didn't want to have the occupancy drop. The seller didn't, the lender. So they said, don't kick anybody out. Just let them stay there. So they'd rather have huge bad debt than actually the reality of what it is. So we go in and we
Why does the lender even want, they'd rather have someone in there not paying than have it vacant and try to find someone that will pay? Why do they even want
So
that?
I believe that some of the lenders, and I'm not saying all of them, and I won't mention who it was, but they had a certain like occupancy the property had to be at. And if it was below that occupancy, obviously there was maybe it was in the loan documents, maybe it was in the tranche agreements between the different A and B buyers or something like that. There was a financial motivation for them not to be good operators. Well, they say the absolute worst operator is better than the best bank when it comes to owning a deal, or lender for that matter. And there's some truth to that because I've never seen a bank or a lender do a great job of running a property because they're all trying to strip the cash out of it and they don't realize, just send us the money. Well, you have a mold here. Well, that's okay. Just let it go. Next thing you know, you got a $5,000 problem that's turned into a $40,000 problem because they didn't fix the problem. And I've seen that again and again when you see these problems just start multiplying on these properties. So yeah, I definitely would say inefficiencies. And I've talked about what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things where I can really add value with management expertise, changing the pricing. I don't want to have to, I'm not relying on I'm not a coupon clipper. I don't want 3% rent growth or 4% rent growth. I want to be able to say, wow, I can jack rents 15, 20%, and here's how I can do it. And here's how I'm going to do it. And I phase it out over time. And that's another thing on the lost old lease. Most people, when they do this, they don't realize if you put 10% in your performance, you don't have lost old lease, you're not getting 10%. You're only getting 5% rent growth. But I see these stupid models coming out and they're showing they got 10%. So the cash, oh, look at all this yield. No, that's not actually how it happens because unless everybody renews in January, which they don't, they have bell curves. Mathematically, they don't get that return. That's why you have to have lost old lease in there. It drags the whole cost down depending on how it's mapped out.
Well, Ken, absolute gold on this entire episode. I'm
Mhm,
learning a lot. I hope our listeners are learning a ton.
mhm,
You've been very generous with your
mhm,
time. Before we get you out of here, a few final questions that we ask
mhm,
everybody that comes on the podcast.
mhm,
I mean, I think we've uncovered some of it. You like reading and doing business, but what
mhm.
else do you like to do for fun?
AI. Yeah, I enjoy making AI automations and trying to figure stuff out. What I've been doing is taking ads of companies and saying, how can I make the ad better? And I take the ad and I break it down and say, okay, this ad's screwed up. How can I make it better? And I've actually done a few of them and they're actually way better than the ads that these people are doing. And I'm always amazed, I'd say that Holiday Inn Select, but how can these people be so bad? They're paying these ad agencies and these ads are terrible. And I discovered the reason is because most people just copy what everybody else is doing. There's no originality. There's no uniqueness at all. It's, hey, what are they doing? Let's just copy that. And that's most 99% of what I see in marketing is just copy. That's why there's so few great marketers out there. And by the way, that's safe. Hey, everybody else is doing it. We'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I would say that I'm definitely driven to learn new things. Reading is probably my number one thing. Definitely learning AI is another big passion of mine. And then right now, marketing has been a big part of my thing as well.
Yeah, I could go on a tangent about marketing agencies. I've had a few, not with my business, but with a few, I won't get too specific,
Yes.
but a
Yeah.
few people close to me that have had some, anyway, my point being some of those marketing agencies print a lot of money for
Mm.
bringing zero or
Value.
negative value to the table. I'll
Yep.
leave it at that.
Yep.
Okay, you mentioned reading, and I always ask people this. I know
Mhm.
you read like an absolute fiend. What is the best thing that you've read recently?
The Art of Not Spending Money by Mark Housel is great. I really enjoyed that. I constantly reread stuff as well. One of my favorite books is called From Darwin to Munger by Peter Beplin. And it's really a deep dive into business models, thinking, and stuff of that nature. Also, I work out a lot too. And one of the things that I really enjoy whenever I work out is I listen to podcasts. So it's part of my reward. Like when we get done talking, I'm going to sit there and work out. I'm listening to different podcasts. And there's some incredible, sci-fi, Game of Thrones type of books that I really enjoy. And that's the only time I do nonfiction is when I work out. So it's kind of like my reward. And I probably read 100 to 125 books a year. But when I'm doing it, I always take the book and I say, okay, what can I learn? What can I apply? How can I? And most of the books are for entertainment. Every now and then they'll be like the marketing books. I'm really trying to get something out of them. So they're all, marked up. There's comments on them. I'm trying to pull data out. And there's a software called Readwise. You can take all your Amazon notes and put it in there. And then I take it and put it into my AI and I create a custom AI that I can then have conversations with the book and the author. And then I'll go back and forth with it and I'll actually ask it questions and I'll probe it because I'm also very interested in where I think the author is wrong. Like, no, I disagree with that. And really trying to poke back and push and say, wait a minute, that's not right. What you described is not correct. And I'll actually highlight those in different colors so that I can follow up on that. And then, of course, you got to tell the AI not to be the sycophant and say, oh, yes, you're a genius. Of course, that's what it is. You have to tell the AI, be a balanced, realistic arbiter and come in and really kind of play that role. So it is interesting, but yeah.
Can I give you a couple book recommendations?
Sure, of course.
Okay, I'll give you two. We were on a trip, so I just went through this one.
Mm-hmm.
Only God Can Judge Me. It's this book about Tupac Shakur that completely changed. It's riveting. It's written by Jeff Pearlman, great author. And then the one I'm reading right now, you've probably heard about this one because I know you listen to a lot of podcasts and everybody's talking about it. It's called Breakneck by what's the guy's name? I'm blanking right now, but it's all about China and the US, but he takes a really cool angle on it about how I'm only 2 chapters in, but chapter 1 is all about how, and kind of the thesis of the book, how China is a nation of engineers and we've turned into a nation of lawyers, and they're just they're building like crazy and our infrastructure is falling up. But it's also very level-headed about, it's not all like rainbows and unicorns with China, like advantages to both systems, but it's, people have been talking about it. It's
okay. I'll check it out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I always look for, and I always enjoy your posts as well. You've got some incredible content out there, and I look forward to one day you write the book, or I should say, rewrite the book.
Well, thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. And then before we get you out of here, anything you'd like to plug? If you want to tell people where to follow you, or if people want to invest in one of your deals, anything before we go.
You guys can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm not really looking for any investors. Our issue is not investors. Our issue is deal flow. And of course, we just have to be patient for when the deals show up, we'll be ready to buy. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I started doing LinkedIn because I felt like, first off, it forces me to be more social. I'm very much into my numbers and into my books and things of that nature. And I've actually, a lot of founders have reached out to me for different prop tech firms, and I've actually given them consulting and talked to them about stuff and how to make their presentations better and how to really change it. But yeah, my primary thing on LinkedIn is just more to learn and educate. I'm not actually trying to sell anything. At one point I had my thing on the book, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not proud of the book. I would write a different book now, or a better book, because I've learned so much. And I think most people who write books, if they can look back in 5 years and say, you know what, I could do a better book, then they haven't grown or expanded. And I've learned so much. Especially, I would rewrite the marketing book and the pricing chapter in particular. There's other chapters I would mess with. But I'm not saying that it's not valuable. I'm just simply saying that knowing what I know now, I would write so much better. And I would have AI to help me. Oh my goodness. Wow. Maybe I would do 100 drafts back and forth with the AI.
Well, I hope you do write the book. And lesson for our audience: the guy or gal who doesn't need any investors is the exact one that you want to invest with. So that's a great sign for your business and for what people think you can. So thanks again for coming on. This was great. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it. Look forward to your next post, Matt. Appreciate it.